The following is an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.
Welcome, everyone. The National Association of Federal Retirees All Candidates meeting for Edmonton Centre takes place now. The National Association of Federal Retirees is the largest national advocacy organization representing active and retired members of the Federal Public Service, Canadian Armed Forces, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, retired federally appointed judges, as well as their partners and survivors. We have 185,000 members, including more than 600,000 veterans, or 60,000 veterans, excuse me, and their families. The association has a 50-year history of providing independent advocacy on issues affecting the financial security, health, and well-being of our members and Canadians. It is our intention to have a space that is open to politicians and individuals of all political stripes, free of partisanship, and focused on the issues that matter to our members. All candidates are invited and given the same opportunity to take in these conversations with our members and the community. The candidates that will appear on the stage in a few moments are those that accepted the invitation. Candidate David Parker for the Green Party did accept the invitation, but because of a recent illness, he is not able to attend. But he sends his regards to everyone. We would like to thank these candidates for their participation, as well as you, members of this community, for taking part. Before we begin, we would also like to thank Shaw TV for recording this event for later airing. And the dates for later airing are September 24, 10 a.m., September 25th, 4 p.m., and September 26th, 8 p.m. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce the moderator. The moderator is Roy Goodall. At present, he's the District Director of the National Association of Federal Retirees. Roy's past history is he was with the Canadian Armed Forces, PPCLI, from 1963 to 2000. He served all across the country, Europe, and the US of A. 2005, he was first elected as director of the PRAIRIES of the National Association of Federal Retirees. Prior to that, he was the Calgary branch president. Then he became the Alberta Provincial Advocacy Officer. He is at present a director of the Calgary Cooperative. He's the director of the Kirby Centre, member of the Calgary Seniors Resource Society. Please welcome Roy Goodall.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this All Candidates debate. I will be the moderator this afternoon. There is a process. Each of the candidates has been randomly assigned a number, which has determined the podium at which they are standing or will stand shortly, and the order in which they will be asked to address the questions that we have prepared and that you, the audience, will be asking. Now, the first candidate will be asked to answer the first question, followed by the answers of the other candidates in order. The second candidate will be asked to answer the second question first, followed by the other candidates in order, and so on. Each candidate will have the opportunity to be the first to respond to a question. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and 3 minutes for their introduction and their closing statements. The timekeepers at the rear, Dave and Ross, will indicate how much time is remaining with colored cards. The amber-colored card will indicate that there is 30 seconds left, and the red card will indicate the candidate's time has run out. Each candidate has been handed a card which they can raise to indicate to the moderator that they would like an opportunity to respond to the answer that another candidate has given to a particular question. At this point, they will be given 2 minutes to respond. After all candidates have answered the question, the other candidates will also have an opportunity. However, to ensure that we can address a large number of questions, the candidates will only be allowed 3 rebuttals each. Now, I have 4 questions, so that means that if an answer is given by one candidate and another candidate decides to rebut, there's a possibility that he may reach the end, desperately want to speak to the 4th question, but will be unable to do so. So they've got to manage their own time as well. At this stage, I'd like to introduce the 3 candidates. The person who is going to be immediately to my left here, Gil McGowan from the NDP party. Gil, if you could come up, please. The candidate who will be in the center, BLAINE BILOCERKOWEC. BLAINE, if you could come up and join us, please. And BLAINE is candidate number 2. And finally, Randy Boissonnault from the Liberal Party of Canada, who will be candidate number 3. Gentlemen, starting with Gil, you will each have 3 minutes for your opening remarks. Gil, would you like to start, please?
Sure. Thanks, Roy, and thanks to the Association for this opportunity. This election presents seniors in Canada with a unique opportunity, an opportunity to sweep aside a government that has consistently disrespected their issues and their concerns. It's also a unique opportunity for seniors to vote for the only party running in this election that has taken the time to craft a robust and detailed strategy for seniors, and that party is the NDP. Our plan, developed in close consultation with seniors and with seniors organizations like yours, would do a number of things. First, it would restore the age of eligibility for GIS and OAS to 65. We would boost GIS and expand the Canada Pension Plan to make sure that seniors aren't retiring into poverty. We'll improve protection for workplace pensions like the ones you've retired on when companies go bankrupt, and we'll make sure that no employer, either in the public or private sector, can make unilateral changes to your benefits after you retire. We would work with the provinces to expand long-term care and home care for seniors. We would reinstate door-to-door mail delivery, partly to make it easier for seniors to continue living in their homes. We would work with provinces and municipalities to invest in affordable housing, to roll back the cuts to housing programs for seniors made by successive Liberal and Conservative governments. We'll reverse Conservatives' punitive cuts to programs for veterans. We'll reopen shuttered Veterans Affairs offices, and we will stop Stephen Harper's proposed $35 billion cuts to Medicare, and we would stop his mean-spirited and unnecessary attacks on workplace pensions that Canadians have paid for themselves and upon which they have based their plans for retirement. In short, this election provides you and seniors like you an opportunity to vote for a party that shares your values, embraces your concerns, and will take steps to make it easier for seniors to live with dignity in this country.
Gil, thank you. Blaine, could we have your 3-minute address, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and congratulations on retiring alive, and thank you for your service for this great country of Canada. I'm the youngest guy on the stage here. My party is also the youngest. We've been around since 1974. Started in response to the bathhouse raids that were going on down east. Our party stands for equal rights for all individuals, all Canadians. As such, we want to decentralize the power as granted by the Constitution, give it back to the provinces, and they can work together to do what they see best for their citizens and their voting public, basically decentralizing everything. We're also reducing your income tax for everybody, by putting at least $800 back in your pocket or keeping it in your pocket, $4,000 tax deduction for children, seniors, disabled people, and students. So we're raising the basic exemption from 11.2 to 17.3. That's how we're accomplishing that. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to guarantee your pension if you, we're also making CPP and EI optional. We're legalizing a private option. So, and we're also going to, as difficult as this may sound, we're going to repeal the Canada Health Act to give the power back to the provinces so they can provide health care to their citizens as they best see fit. That's what I got.
Thank you. Randy, may we have your opening remarks, please?
Indeed. Thanks, Roy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Randy BOISSONNAULT, and I'm working hard to serve as the next Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre. So what I'd like to do in my opening statement is share with you a little bit about my background and then talk about what our collective hopes and dreams are for our future. And I know that we're going to get into the issues that matter to you most in the questions, and I just want to set a broad context for that off the start. Let me begin by thanking the National Association of Federal Retirees for putting this important forum together. And let me thank everyone who's here today because it shows how much you care about our community and our country. So I was born in Edmonton, went to university here, and started my business here. And I run a business that helps other small businesses and charities grow and achieve their full potential. And I'm a community volunteer. I'm passionate about literacy, economic development, sport, and I've spent years of my life working to build up organizations in those various communities here in Edmonton, in Alberta, and across the country. And one of the most exciting things, having knocked on doors now for over a year and a half, is meeting Edmontonians here in Edmonton Centre, but all over the city. And what they have shared with me, having now talked to thousands of Edmontonians, is that there are many things in their minds. They're worried about the future, they're hopeful to see some real change, and they want to have a member of parliament that they can be proud of and that they know is representing their interests in Ottawa. And what I've heard in knocking these doors, folks, is 5 main priorities, 5 reasons why I'm working hard to serve as your member of parliament. The first is to get the economy back on track. We are in recession, and the NDP has an austerity plan that would likely keep us there. We have to get people back to work. We are the only party talking about investing in the economy and getting a massive investment in the middle class. We have to get our environment back. We have to fix the broken immigration system. We have to repair our relationships with First Nations people, Métis and Aboriginals, Inuit, and folks, it's time to get our international reputation back, all while respecting federal employees, the agreements that we have in place with you, and making sure that none of those agreements are taken from legislation. I will work hard to serve as your member of parliament and to represent your interests as the next Liberal member of parliament in Edmonton Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, what will happen now is I will read a question, and then each candidate will have an opportunity to respond for 3 minutes. The order for this question will be Blaine, Randy, and Gill. And then there's also an opportunity for rebuttal if one of the candidates would like to respond to a comment made by another candidate. The first question. Gentlemen, in the past year, the federal government has begun consultations on implementing target benefit plans for Crown corporations and federally regulated employers instead of a guaranteed income and guaranteed indexation to help protect retirees from inflation. These plans could potentially reduce pensions and remove indexation. The question: what is your position on target benefit plans for Crown corporations and federally regulated employers. Blaine, if you could respond first, please.
You people are the first to hear about the Libertarians Party plan for a negative income tax, or a MINCOM as it were. We're proposing that your benefits and pensions that you've all worked for will remain yours. The public option still remains. However, for upcoming generations, you would also be entitled to the children's benefits you have now on a sliding scale, rising up to $650 per month, and that would be, every Canadian would be eligible that from cradle to grave, as long as your income is under $20,000 Canadian. At that point, this starts sliding backwards. That will guarantee everybody, especially the poorest in the nation, would be able to provide for themselves better than they have now. And that's just the federal program. Provincial and municipalities are free to clone the program, so you could have multiple layers of benefits.
Thank you. Randy, if we could have your response, please.
Sure. With respect to targeted benefit plans for Crown employees and federally regulated employers, the Liberal Party believes fundamentally that employers have a responsibility to make good on the commitments that they make to members of the federal public service. We also believe in the collective bargaining process, and so we do not support and we do not believe that any legislation should be able to change the defined benefit plans that you have. And quite frankly, we also believe that these issues should be made in full consultation with employees, and that it should be part of the collective bargaining process. And if you would look back to the last time the Liberal Party was in office in Ottawa, we led the largest modern renewal of the federal public service, and we're committed to growing the federal public service because we're all up here trying to be an elected official, but government doesn't work with just elected officials, as you well know. If you try to go to Government of Canada, to the Government of Canada office downtown Canada Place to Service Canada, or try to go talk to a human being at CRA or in Veterans Affairs, you are going to wait, if not for hours, for weeks to get a response from something other than a form letter or an automated machine. And we are committed to renewing the public service once again and to making good on our commitments to existing pensions. And should any employees want to make changes to those pensions, that should be part of the collective bargaining process. We value the federal public service, and quite frankly, government doesn't function unless we have individuals such as yourselves who committed either all of or great parts of their careers to building up our country and serving Canadians. And we will make good on that commitment.
Thank you. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Thank you. When it comes to the issue of public sector pensions, the unfortunate reality is that the Harper government is in the thrall of groups like the CFIB, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the Fraser Institute, who have very consciously and deliberately, for more than a decade now, been running a deceitful and aggressive campaign to demonize public sector workers in general and public sector pensions in particular. They say things like public sector pensions are freebies and giveaways, even though we know that public sector workers, like other people who have the benefit of workplace pensions, actually put their own money into these plans. They say also, for example, that these plans are unsustainable when we know that actuaries and economists have come to the conclusion that they are sustainable. So it's in the context of this aggressive campaign against public sector pension plans that we should see this push for target benefits. It's part of that strategy. It's an outgrowth of what I would describe as a poisonous ideology that says instead of providing retirement income security to those who don't have it, we should rip it away from those who do. As the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, protecting public sector pensions has been part of my life's work. I've also been chair of the Labour Coalition on Pensions, and in that position I led the fight against attempts by the Redford and Prentice governments right here in Alberta to transform Alberta public sector pension plans into glorified target plans, and we won. If I find myself in opposition after this election, I will help lead the kind of campaign to defend your pensions as I did here in Alberta. And if I'm in government, we will stop this move towards target plans. The final thing I'll say is in relation to something that Randy just said. Listen carefully to what Randy and other Liberals have said on this question about target plans. He didn't say no to target plans. He said that he would, and his government would, if elected, protect existing benefits. He's basically saying they're guaranteeing only not to pull up the ladder. They might pull up the ladder for existing public sector workers. They won't take your pension plan away, but they may take the pension plans from existing and future public sector workers. He also said that they would do that through the collective bargaining process. They would negotiate it, but he never said that he wouldn't take a position in favor of target plans. Thank you.
Gil, I think you got a little bit of a freebie on the rebuttal there. Blaine, Randy, I'm just wondering if either of you would like to rebut anything that Gil may have said, or Gil, if you have anything further to say about the other candidates' comments. Gentlemen, is there anything? All right. Randy?
Let me be clear. The Liberal Party of Canada is here to support and honor our commitments to your pensions, past and present. We will meet with unions at the table to negotiate, and we are not in favor of target benefit pensions, Gil. You can speak for the NDP and I'll speak for the Liberals. So folks, you can look at our policy, it's on our website, and our robust, fully costed seniors plan will be available in the coming weeks so that you can have a look and you can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, colors included, what the different parties are promising for seniors, including making sure that we hold our commitments to federal public servants. So I'm happy to speak on behalf of the Liberal Party and let Gil speak on behalf of the NDP.
Thank you. Gentlemen, are there any further rebuttals in this question? No? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the second question. The Canadian Medical Association and other like-minded groups have publicly stated that the federal government should work with the provinces in reshaping the health system. This would include the creation of a healthcare strategy and a national senior strategy, which would ensure that seniors have access to effective, integrated, and affordable care. Gentlemen, the question: what is your position on reshaping the health system? And the first person to speak this time is Randy, please.
Thanks, Roy. Folks, the Liberal Party of Canada is the party of Medicare. We are the party that brought the healthcare program in. Yeah, you may want to go back to Saskatchewan and the NDP and Tommy Douglas, but it took a Liberal government federally to implement the policy and to make it the law of the land. And it was Judy LaMarche who led that in a Pierre Trudeau government. And so that is how history played out, folks. And we know the 5 tenets of the Canadian Healthcare Act are not being implemented under a Stephen Harper government. And we will return. The number one thing that's missing in the healthcare system right now, in addition to funding and innovation, is the simple matter of sitting down and coordinating the elements of a system. This is a federation, and you cannot have as many moving pieces as you have in a healthcare system and want it to function properly and improve healthcare delivery for Canadians unless you have a prime minister that is prepared to sit down with the first minister and set some targets for healthcare, like we did when Paul Martin was prime minister and sat down with the premiers and got a fully costed $42 billion health accord that included elder care, pharmacare, palliative care, increases to the provinces to meet targets on wait times and performance. And that is exactly the kind of health accord you will see coming from a Justin Trudeau-led Liberal government that I intend to be part of. We need innovation in the system, which means additional funding. And you will see in our infrastructure program, $125 billion over the next 10 years. You will see investment in social infrastructure. That includes social housing, seniors housing, affordable housing, mental health care supports, and early child care spaces, all that take pressure off of our healthcare system so that the healthcare system can innovate. Are we going to reform the healthcare system? Absolutely, because it's been left on autopilot for the last 10 years when the federal government has simply left it in the hands of the provinces to spend the money in whatever way they want without oversight. Canada is a federation, folks, and it needs coordination in the system with the Prime Minister and the Premiers and with the Minister of Health federally and all of the provincial ministers of health, and that is what we will do as the next Liberal government here in Canada.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, your opportunity.
Randy begun his answer by claiming credit for Medicare. He may be a comedian, but he's certainly not a historian. I think everyone in this new room and across the country knows that it was the NDP under Tommy Douglas who pioneered Medicare. It was introduced at the national level under a Liberal government, not Pierre Trudeau, under Lester Pearson, in a minority government that was propped up by New Democrats who basically made him do it. And Canadians are ever thankful for that fact. The NDP pioneered Medicare, and we're still the party most forcefully committed to defending it. Unlike our party, the Harper Conservatives have spent the past 10 years eroding the foundations of Medicare. By refusing to negotiate a new health care accord with the provinces, Harper has accelerated a federal withdrawal from Medicare that started with Liberal governments under Chrétien and Martin, and even going back to Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre. It used to be a 50-50 partnership between the federal government. Now it's less than 20% of the funding coming from the federal government. The NDP is the only party that would reverse these trends. We would immediately cancel Harper's proposed $36 billion planned cuts to health care, and we'd quickly convene a meeting with the premiers to negotiate a new health accord. We'd also work to achieve Tommy Douglas's vision by working with the provinces to expand the Medicare umbrella, by looking at things like a national long-term care strategy, a strategy for home care, a mental health strategy, measures aimed at preventing illness in the first place, and perhaps most importantly, we would aggressively begin a discussion towards the introduction of a national pharmacare plan. And even before those agreements are concluded, we'll show leadership on the healthcare file by improving health services that are directly and solely under the federal government's purview, including healthcare services for Indigenous people, refugees, and veterans.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Thanks, Roy. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, one of the tenets of our program is we are going to repeal the Canada Health Act and, by virtue of the Constitution of Canada, give the power back to the provinces to administer health care to their citizens as they see fit. The federal government has over 12,000 people employed in Health Canada, and I, for one, don't see how they are providing value at that level of bureaucracy. That can be eliminated, money can be saved, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, would any of you like to rebut something that another candidate has said at this stage? No? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll turn to the third question, and first a short statement. Question number 3. The ever-increasing costs for prescription drugs have a real impact on many seniors' financial well-being. As well, there have been numerous reports on the cost savings to all parties if there were a national pharmacare program. Question: what is your position on working with the provinces to create a national pharmacare program? Gil, you have the first opportunity to respond.
Thanks, Roy. As I mentioned earlier, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. As the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour for the last decade, I have worked closely with seniors organizations and affiliated unions, most notably the Health Sciences Association of Alberta and the United Nurses of Alberta, to champion this idea of a national pharmacare plan. So I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to this issue. It is something that I believe in my heart that the time has come. And I think it's important to recognize that while Medicare was pioneered by the New Democrats in Saskatchewan in the 40s and made into a national program in the 1960s. We still have not achieved the vision first laid out by Tommy Douglas all those years ago. He said at the time that it was a work in progress. So we first got coverage for hospital services, then for physician-provided services, but it was always Tommy's vision, and it's a vision held by many New Democrats, that the Medicare umbrella would eventually be expanded to include other medically necessary services like long-term care, home care, dental care, vision care, and of course, pharmacare. For us, even though it's not in our platform right now, it is something that is policy for the party. And the only reason it's not in the platform is because we felt that we hadn't dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's to prove the costing. But if I'm elected as MP for this riding, this is an issue that I will carry forward not only as a local MP, but as a member of what I hope is a government caucus. And so that the next time around, the next time we come to you as candidates seeking your support, it will be part of the New Democrat platform. And there are two reasons why I think this needs to be done. The first, it has to do with quality of care. So much medically necessary care that Canadians receive now is provided outside of the hospital environment, which is covered by Medicare. Once you're outside of the hospital, unfortunately, your necessary prescribed prescription drugs fall outside, and a lot of people are lucky enough to have coverage through workplace plans, but many don't. So what we need to do is expand the umbrella. And the second reason has to do with cost. This is a rare opportunity to provide better care while at the same time reducing costs. By introducing a pharmacare plan, we can actually give Canadians the kind of care that they need and deserve while actually reducing the costs that we spend on prescription drugs by as much as $11.5 billion a year. This is a win-win-win situation that only the New Democrats can be counted on to bring from the drawing board into reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
As I mentioned, we're going to be giving the power back to the provinces where it constitutionally belongs. As far as a national pharmacare program, our party is based on decentralizing everything, giving the power back to the provinces, getting the power closer to you as a citizen of Canada. How does a student in Ottawa, hopefully myself, know what's best for you in Glenwood or Glenora or Stadium LRT station? They don't. You know what's best for you. It's that simple.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, may we have your response, please?
Absolutely. The Liberal Party fundamentally believes that the healthcare system is a critical component and a critical piece of our Canadian identity, and it speaks to compassion and to dignity. And we know that 50% of our population will approach being over 65 in the next 5 to 10 years. And folks, we know that the costs of healthcare are going to rise. And we think it's a fundamental matter of compassion and dignity that we look at a pharmacare strategy, a national pharmaceutical strategy, as we did in the 2004 Health Accord. There were 9 separate elements of that Health Accord that was fully funded, $42 billion in consultation with the provinces to make sure that those folks who need access to pharmaceuticals for their medical treatment do not suffer financial hardship in the process. It is a part of the original vision of Medicare. We know that. And what I urge you to do is to take a look at the fully costed plans of the parties and see how individual parties are going to pay for the things that matter to you. The NDP has locked themselves into an austerity budget for the first year of the next mandate, and the Liberals understand that we're already in deficit, we're already in recession, and that we need the largest investment in Canadian history to get us through this recession to balanced books by 2019, providing a robust healthcare plan, including access to pharmaceuticals, providing seniors housing, and additional funding for affordable housing and for seniors housing. So we have been at this table before. We've done the negotiations with the provinces to look at a pharmaceutical strategy, and the Harper government, upon coming into office, threw it away. And with all respect to my Libertarian colleague here, we already have a clear separation of 91 and 92 with the powers to the provinces and the powers to the federal government. It's how Jim Flaherty has created all of the health transfer budgets until he left office. It's a simple calculation formula, and a Liberal Party will bring coordination back to the system, compassion back to the system, so that folks throughout their lifetimes can live in dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, I see a rebuttal flag. Gil.
I want to respond to something that Blaine said and then a couple of things that Randy said. First, I just can't contain myself. I need to respond to this notion that the Canada Health Act should be torn up. It was introduced exactly to stop provincial governments from violating the Medicare Trust. I want you guys to imagine what would have happened in Alberta if the Canada Health Act did not exist and putting restrictions on what the provincial government did during the Klein years. If we had this kind of system that Blaine envisions in the mid-90s and the early 2000s, the third way, Ralph Klein's third way in healthcare, which we stopped collectively, would have become a reality, and this vision of a national Medicare plan would have collapsed into rubble. In terms of Randy's comments, I just got to say this. You know, there's a phrase that has been applied to the Liberal Party in the past. For a long time in this country, they were considered the natural governing party of Canada. And that phrase was attached to them because they were in power for many, many years. So while it's true that under duress, they introduced Medicare on a national level in 1961, they had numerous governments, numerous opportunities over the next 20, 30, 40 years to expand that vision, to expand the Medicare umbrella, to introduce a pharmacare plan. It was part of not one, not two, but three election platforms for the Liberals. Never implemented. The only time they got a signed deal was in the dying days before the Martin government lost to Stephen Harper, and they knew they were going to lose. So if this is a party that's really committed to expanding the Medicare umbrella and including pharmacare in the Medicare package, why on earth did they not do it before? And how can we trust them when they've promised it so many times before and failed to deliver? Only the New Democrats have been consistently and aggressively in support of expanding the Medicare umbrella to cover prescription drugs.
Thank you, Gil. Ladies and gentlemen, not seeing any other rebuttal flags, I will move on to the fourth question. First, the statement. In retirement, members of Parliament, senators, and senior officials continue to have fully paid health care coverage by the government. Up until recently, other federal retirees shared the premium cost with the federal government on a 25-75 ratio. That is, the federal retiree paid 25% and the federal government paid 75%. Effective in 2015, the government imposed a plan that will change this long-standing agreed cost-share ratio to a 50-50 ratio, which will effectively double the premium costs that will be paid by retirees. Question. What action will your party take regarding the public service healthcare plan premium for retirees? And the first opportunity for response this time goes to Blaine.
You worked for it, didn't you? You worked your whole life for it. The government, being the government, just wants to take it away from you and change the rules at the end of the game. We don't play that way. We want you to be governing yourselves, not others, throughout your whole life. We want you to have everything you worked for, the guarantees you worked for, those are yours. We just want to legalize some private options for the up-and-coming generations so we can leave this country in better shape than I found it, and hopefully with less debt. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, your opportunity, please.
Thanks, Roy. On this question, the Conservative government has attempted to dismantle the benefits that public servants receive by bypassing and weakening the rules of the collective bargaining process. The Liberal Party of Canada believes that this is wrong and that we bargain in good faith. with public sector unions and that we are against imposing these changes through legislation outside of the collective bargaining process. These are your benefits, and this is what you're planning retirement on. And we understand that, and we respect that, and we want to make sure, and will make sure, that they are protected. We will work with the public sector unions of the federal public service to see that we can not just preserve, but enhance those benefits as we embark again on the largest public sector renewal in Canadian history, because the federal government under Stephen Harper has fired thousands of federal public servants. And if as Canadians we want to see our services restored to a level that we think is appropriate and worthy of our country, we need to make sure that federal public servants understand not just the rules of their compensation, but also what their pensions look like in retirement. It's exactly the same thing that we are promising and that we will restore for veterans. You can refer to our veterans plan at realchange.ca, which is where we are committing to ensuring that veterans of all ages have access to their supports, that their families have access to supports, and that they have access to folks throughout their lifetimes as veterans to manage their file and make sure that their needs are taken care of. It comes down to compassion, folks, and it's why through the employment insurance program, we have also introduced a compassionate care benefit to make those rules flexible, because we know there are people, maybe even in this room, who are having to care for either a sick parent or adult or for a child, and we have heard this on the doors, and we are the party that will be compassionate and make those changes, and we will preserve the pensions as we have made these commitments in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, answer the question, please.
Sure. There are two issues involved in response to this question. The first has to do with collective bargaining. The Harper government is unprecedented in Canadian history for the contempt with which they have approached the whole collective bargaining process. That process has served us well in terms of providing conditions and terms of employment for the thousands of people working in the public sector, providing important services to Canadians, and in return they get a package of wages and benefits. But right from the get-go, first when he was elected as a minority prime minister in 2006, and then more recently when he got his long sought after majority, one of the first things that Stephen Harper did was to use the power of Parliament to override the collective bargaining process. And he's thumbed his nose at your unions, he's thumbed his nose at you as individuals, and he's used the heavy hand of legislation when reasonable bargaining should have taken its place. And so this is about a bully government that is ignoring Canada's own rules and legislation, our traditions and our history about constructive bargaining between government and its employees. The second issue has to do with the nature of the benefits themselves. They have cast you as greedy. They have cast public sector workers generally, but the federal workers in particular, as beneficiaries of gold-plated benefits. But the reality is your post-retirement drug benefits are not inconsistent with benefits enjoyed by many workers in the private sector. These are benefits that you've paid for, you've planned on, and that you've earned. And so I will say today, unequivocally, that not only will a New Democrat government respect and embrace the collective bargaining process, we will not come to the table as employers demanding a watering down of your post-retirement benefits, either for existing retirees or for current federal employees. The final thing I wanted to do is just respond to some of these things that Randy said about how the Liberals respect the federal service, that they were going to, he's bemoaning the austerity imposed by the Harper Conservatives, laying off thousands of public sector workers. He talks about how the Liberals are going to strengthen EI. I think it's important that we be reminded that it was the Liberals under Chrétien and Martin who presided over an unprecedented gutting of the public sector, and Harper has simply continued where they left off. The same is true with unemployment insurance. There was a time when 80% of unemployed Canadians would qualify for benefits. Under the Liberals, it went down to 40%.
I must interrupt. You have run out of time.
Okay.
Now, I do see a flag from Randy, but at the same time, Gil was in the advanced stages of a rebuttal to something that Randy had said earlier. Gil, would you like to exercise your flag and continue that, or may I turn to Randy for his? No. Yeah. Randy, may we have your rebuttal, please?
Thanks, Roy. The context of the 1990s was something that we need to remind ourselves where we were. The country was just about to be taken over by the International Monetary Fund because our debt to GDP ratio was at a level that was unsustainable. The Chrétien and Martin governments made some tough choices through the 1990s to get to the point where we had the healthiest budget as a G7 nation, the greatest growth, and 8 consecutive surpluses so that we could start rebuilding this country. The Liberal Party handed Stephen Harper a $13 billion surplus, and he systematically chipped it away and then began attacking democratic institutions. Now, folks, I can't ask Gil a direct question, but I want you to go to the internet and look for a fully costed plan from the NDP. There's at least $35 billion missing in their plans to date, and simple economics state that money doesn't grow on trees, and we need a healthy economy to make this, to pay for everything that we're talking about. The Liberal Party is the only party that is talking about the fact that the Harper Conservatives have pushed us into a deficit, that we are in a recession, and that we will invest in our country to get to the other side, have a balanced budget in 2019, and all the while build up the public service, build up our cities, improve our international reputation, and get not just our economy, but the environment and our relationship with Aboriginal peoples back on track. We are the party that in the 1980s made the Canada Health Act real. And Gil, the reason you guys got fire to be able to take Klein on is because Anne McClellan and the federal Liberals were hammering the Klein government because they were not respecting the Canada Health Act provisions, and that is exactly what you will see from a Liberal government under Justin Trudeau.
I never saw Anne at any demonstrations.
Thank you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not see any more, oops, I do. Blaine, a rebuttal flag, please.
Thank you for bringing up the federal debt, Randy. As I'm sure you're aware, under Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1974, they took the International Monetary Fund and they started allowing private bankers to make 2% off the backs of Canadians. Rocco Gelati and Comer currently have a case against the Bank of Canada, which you might have seen in the news, maybe not, because there seems to be a publication ban because they don't want you to see the hockey stick curve on the graph, the escalating debt that's been racked up thanks to the Liberals.
Can I rebut a rebuttal?
Thank you, Blaine. Gil, yes, you have a rebuttal.
So I'm in the process of rebutting a rebuttal. I just have to say say something to some of the remarks that Randy made. Probably most importantly, he has repeatedly made the point that we should trust a new Liberal government to do what previous Liberal governments have not done. The last time they got the keys to this country, they presided over one of the most draconian austerity budgets in Canadian history. What we just heard from Randy was that it was different then, and we will be different now. I think this is a classic example of the Liberals running from the left and governing from the right. There's a narrative, I would actually say a fairy tale, that has been deliberately developed by the Liberals to distance themselves from their own past when it comes to austerity and budget cuts. Randy has repeated it today. They say times are different. We were about to hit the debt wall. The IMF was about to take over the country. That's a fantasy. Were we in a recession? Yes. Did we have a debt problem? Yes. Did they respond to that debt problem by laying off tens of thousands of public sector workers, probably some of you, probably some of your colleagues. Yes, they did that. And did a few years later the economy recover? Yes, it did. But the two things had nothing to do with each other. Economists have come to the conclusion that austerity doesn't end recessions, it makes them deeper and longer. They weren't smart, they got lucky. Because what happened in the years following the liberal austerity budget was that the price of oil shot through the roof and we became a petro economy. So in the same way that Ralph Klein benefited and he became, King Ralph for his budget cutting, they said it's brilliant what he did. He got lucky because he was a beneficiary of high oil prices. So were the Paul Martin and John Chrétien Liberals. Their austerity didn't save Canada. Luck saved Canada, and we can't trust these guys because they will say one thing and do something else. They've done it before. Can they be trusted not to do it again?
Thank you, Gil. Gentlemen, I see no further rebuttal flags, and we are very close to the end, and we are actually at the end of the fixed questions, ladies and gentlemen. So at this stage, there is an opportunity for members of the audience to ask questions, and each of the candidates will have an opportunity to respond to that question for 2 minutes. Now, if there are no questions from the floor, I have additional questions that can be asked. So, ladies and gentlemen, if somebody would like to ask a question, please come up here to the mic, ask your question, and then the first person to speak this time, to respond, will be Randy, followed by Blaine, followed by Gil. Your question, please, ma'am.
Yes, it has been brought to my attention by many of my friends who have seniors in long-term care. These people are just turning into shadows, and they're not being taken care of properly. And one question I asked a while ago was, who is responsible for that? Why can they not do something, take care of these people? The response was, oh, that is our provincial government, not our new one, but whoever. Anyway, I don't know if you understand me, but what I'm asking is, it's a crime. The way these people are in these long-term facilities, and they just, after a few months, just fade away. They're drugged so they can sleep most of the time and not be a problem. No one is there to feed them, and if they eat one meal a day, that is the best that they ever get. I have seen them. I have been with my friends in these places to see their parents there, and I'd rather drop dead quickly than ever go to one of those places. So I want to know, what can our federal government, whoever it's going to be, okay, can do in regards to the long-term homes in Alberta? I don't know about the rest of Canada, but here it's appalling. And you get ignored, doctors ignore you. I don't have a lot of regard for most of them, but that's my opinion. Anyway, I'd like to know, what can our federal government, can they do, if whoever is elected, to change this cruelty that's happening with our seniors? That's it.
Randy, are you clear on the question at hand?
I am. Thank you very much for the question. I was speaking with a resident on her doorstep, and she has lived through the experience that you're sharing with us. And in her particular case, her mother needed level 2 care and her father needed level 4 care. There was simply no space in the system for the couple to actually be housed in the same system. And so if both were to have care, they were to be split up as a couple, and that's what has happened. And so it's very sad. And the answer to your question is there's two components. One is a physical facilities question, and the other is a programming question. And what it requires from your next federal government is leadership, and that the next federal government gets back to the table in healthcare. It has been 10 years where the federal government has basically said, that's your power, provinces, do what you will. There has not been enforcement of the Canadian Health Act. There has not been funding or any coordination in the system for innovation, including seniors care, long-term care facilities. And our plan as a Liberal Party is to restore coordination to the system, compassion to the system, and to make sure that the funding is in place through a health accord, as we've already discussed, that takes into account aging in place, preventative care, seniors care facilities, adequate funding to the provinces to run those facilities, and our infrastructure program, which you can look up online or we can get the information to you, will build other new seniors care facilities and provide funding to refurbish and maintain existing seniors care facilities. It is a blight on our healthcare system, and we need to fix it. And you will have my full support in caucus in the Liberal Party to make that happen.
Thank you, Randy. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Thank you. It was an excellent question. Quite simply, federal government is incapable of innovating. By nature, government just absorbs efficiency. We want to, the provincial healthcare is indeed a provincial jurisdiction. My own mother, hi Mom, works for a private industry doing home care, and with innovation brought on by the private sector, if we're allowed to provide a private option, would relieve stress on the public option. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Healthcare, including long-term care, is a provincial responsibility. However, that doesn't mean that any federal government should simply wash their hands of responsibility as well. In fact, Medicare, as a general service, is an example of the federal government taking leadership. So many things that we've come to rely on in Canada, so many things that we cherish, like the Medicare system itself, were developed in spite of the constitutional division of powers between the federal government and the provincial governments, not because of it. Medicare never would have happened because it is, by its nature, a partnership and a negotiation between the federal government on one hand and provinces on the other. What has happened over the last 20 years, starting with Liberal governments and accelerating under the Harper Conservative government, is a withdrawal from the field by the federal government in terms of responsibility and partnership with the provinces on healthcare. As I said earlier, when the system was first established, it was a 50-50 partnership between the federal government and the provinces. Under the Liberals, the amount of money going from the federal government to the provinces declined dramatically, and that decline has continued under the Harper Conservatives. So what would a New Democrat government do to reverse this troubling situation for Medicare in general and long-term care in particular? What we would do is we'd return to the field aggressively and demand cooperation. But what history tells us about the Medicare system and other areas of shared responsibility is that rhetoric is not enough, promises of coordination are not enough. The only way that the federal government can actually move the yardsticks on an issue like this is by providing money. And that's how the federal government played a leadership role in creating Medicare. It is at the root of it, it's how we're going to do it if we want to make strides on long-term care. We have to put our money where our mouth is. That's the only way that we can build the partnership necessary.
Thank you, Gil. We've run out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not see a rebuttal flag. Therefore, we'll go to the second question. Please.
I guess I would like to address one thing to the moderator. Thank you very much for good work on it. But as a former professional teacher and as a grandfather, I really miss, even though we're seniors, I think others probably do, having a bit broader presentation to me as an 82-year-old man. As you know, we care about the other ages as well. I wanted to address a question to Mr. Cummings, is it, or Cunning?
Unfortunately, the Conservative candidate is not here.
I was going to ask him what he's afraid of. And maybe the other contestants could answer for him or for themselves. Thank you.
Gentlemen, Gil, but you have the first opportunity to respond to the question.
That was perhaps the most entertaining and illuminating moment of this forum. And, certainly I can't answer on behalf of Mr. Cumming. He's elusive. I still actually haven't met him. I've heard rumors of him. But I think it's important that people in this room and voters who may be watching this broadcast later in the month understand what has been happening not only in this riding, but in every federal riding across the country. An edict has been handed down from the Conservative Party headquarters directing candidates to refuse interview requests from the media and invitations from groups like this one inviting local candidates to participate in debates. Now, I can't speak for Mr. Cummings. I don't know if his decision not to participate in this particular forum is based on a decision to follow marching orders from Stephen Harper. I think there's a good chance that it was. Maybe he was sick. Maybe something more important came up than talking to voters in his own riding on important issues. But I think that what we're seeing from the Conservatives in this refusal to talk to voters and only to speak in tightly controlled and tightly scripted environments, it speaks volumes about the kind of government that we've been getting from this party and the kind of government that we'll get if they're reelected. It's fundamentally undemocratic, and it's insulting to voters like you, and it's just yet another example of why this is a party that needs to be replaced in government.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Of course, I can't speak for the Conservative candidate, but would you want to show up on report card day with their track record? One of the basic tenets of libertarianism, our own party leader, Tim Moen, will tell you being the party leader for the Libertarian Party is a lot like herding cats. It's an almost impossible task. As an MP for your riding here in Edmonton Centre, if elected, I will work hard for you, follow the basic party principles, policies, and platforms, but as an individual, libertarianism rings true with me, and I will fight for what you want, not for what the party wants, and we don't have a party whip, so I don't have to say no or answer to anybody, just you. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, may we have your response, please?
Absolutely. If I look out, as I look out onto this room, I see nothing that's scary at all, sir. I see people who have built this country. I see people who have hope for what we can be as a country. I see people who have contributed their lives to building up our city, other communities, and simply want to make sure that they send somebody to Ottawa who's going to be working on their behalf to see that more of that happens. And when I launched my campaign for the nomination for the Liberals in November of 2013, I knew it would be a long job interview process. And every door that I knock on, and I've now knocked on well over 15,000 doors, is every time I knock on a door, it's another part of the job interview. And so if you have an empty chair is because one of the teams isn't prepared to show up for their job interview. And when I hire people, they don't get the job if they don't show up for their interviews. And that's one of the things that I think you should say, we should take into account. This is, folks, this is Canada. This is the core of the democratic process. And if you can't show up to talk to the people who are your neighbors, that you see in the grocery store, that you see on the street, the people that you're asking to put out a sign for you and put an X on a ballot, that people have fought and died and lost limbs over to do, then you don't deserve the vote or the sign or the respect of the people in the room who showed up to engage in our democratic process. And so I want folks to know that everybody here showed up for the job interview, and I know you will all do your homework, and I think you should. There's another thing that I'll add to what Gil said, is it's a little bit more insidious than not just showing up for the job interview, because some organizations, and I thank you, are not able to have their forums if not all the three main parties are there. So there are a lot of discussions that simply do not happen because one of us doesn't show up, and that is wrong. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Randy. As much as I do not anticipate a rebuttal flag, I'll check. No, there are none. Ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to the next question. Sir, your question, please.
Over the last decades, the power of individual MPs has been eroded significantly. It's been taken over by the power of party leaders and taken over by the Prime Minister's office. It seems that MPs are becoming nothing more than voting tokens in Ottawa. So when MPs are silenced in Ottawa, we citizens in the constituency, I feel, are also being silenced. So my question is, if you are elected, what will you do to restore the power of individual MPs and therefore bring democracy back to the areas, to the constituencies?
Blaine, you have the honor of the first response, please.
It starts from the top down. We're giving the power back to the provinces, and it will trickle down. I know it's a horrible word, it's horrible saying trickle down, but through the municipalities, back to your front door, backyard. And as I said, I have a party leader, Tim Moen, who is a firefighter, paramedic. He's stepped away from his job to dedicate his time full-time to leadership, but like he said, it's like herding cats, us libertarians. We have no party whip. As long as we're abiding by the principles, policy, and platform, we work for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, may we have your response,
Sure.
please?
Thanks very much for the question. One of the things that I'm most proud of the Liberal Party is our commitment to open and fair government and reforming Parliament to make sure that happens. And it starts with listening to citizens. And that's the commitment that I made to Edmontonians in Edmonton Centre over a year and a half ago, that I would listen, that I would learn, and that I would advocate. And part of that is not just being on the doors, it's also hosting forums. We've held, I think, a dozen forums on issues from Veterans Affairs to youth engagement to environment to Aboriginal matters to an economic roundtable, just to listen to see what really matters to folks here in Edmonton Centre. And in talking with Justin Trudeau and in looking at the plan, we can evaluate our leaders on what they've already done as leaders. And within 9 months of being leader, Justin Trudeau released all Liberal senators as Liberals from the Senate caucus, making those senators independent of all party affiliation and restoring those senators back to the original function of the Senate, making that part of the Senate very functional. And let's remember that we are all here running to replace a government whose leader said he would never appoint a single senator to the Senate and has now appointed 59 of them. We are also going to have more free votes, sir. We are going to have, what Justin wants is to hear more of Edmonton and Ottawa and less of Ottawa and Edmonton, and so do I. And part of that is we are going to reform the first past the post system, folks. It's on our literature. We are running to change the first past the post system. We will have a blue chip committee to look at proportional representation and preferential ballot. And at the 18-month mark of our mandate, we will pass legislation so that in 2019, when you send MPs to Ottawa, they will have 50% or more of the vote. And that is our commitment to democracy. We will also restore the long-form census, unmuzzle scientists, and bring back accountability in government.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Thanks for that great question. To put it simply, I didn't throw my hat into the ring for this election to become a mindless voting machine. We have a democratic system here in Canada, and it only functions as long as there's a direct connection between those who vote for representatives and those who represent the voters. I agree with you that our democracy, as it has evolved over the past 30 or 40 years in Canada, is not nearly as robust as it was. It's not as accountable as it should be. And frankly, we continue to seem to be moving in the wrong way in terms of more power being concentrated in the hands of fewer at the top of the political hierarchy. We all pay a price for that, because I'm a firm believer that the best public policy comes from broad public debate. And this is actually one of the things that I've seen in my lifetime, and it feels like a lifetime, 10 years as president of the Alberta Federation of Labour. I've approached my internal governance in a way that puts my members at the center. I learned early on that people have the answers. Good things come from discussion. You always come to a better conclusion when more people are involved, and that when you base your decisions on evidence. The final thing I'm going to say is that we are facing an incredible opportunity. Both the New Democrats and the Liberals have committed themselves to introducing a system of proportional representation. I am convinced that between the two of us, we will win a large majority in the next Parliament. And once we introduce a system of proportional representation, just by introducing that system, it will mean that the Imperial Prime Minister's office will be a vestige of history.
Thank you, Gil. Gentlemen, I do not see any rebuttal flags, so we'll go to the next question from the mic, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sue, and I'm a pharmacist in Alberta, and I have been asked to come here to see if you would be willing to cooperate with the Canadian National Pharmacists Association and provincial associations in any plan that involves pharmacare. I also have a copy of the Canadian Pharmacists Association's election brief in which they show their support for pharmacare.
Ma'am, if I can just be clear, the question is, you'd like to know if the candidates are, what their views are on the National Pharmacare Plan.
Well, if they're willing to include pharmacists in any kind of dialogue about pharmacare.
Okay, thank you. Randy, on this question, you have the opportunity to the first response.
The Liberal Party of Canada believes in evidence-based policymaking, not policy-based evidence-making, like we've been seeing from the Conservative government. And so we're interested in broad consultation as we move forward to map out all of the elements of our health accord. And so it makes great sense to me that we consult with you. And I'm happy to take the brief and share it with our health critic, Dr. Hetty Fry. And I would love to read it so that I understand what the national and provincial associations are saying. Folks, this is an example of what can happen when the orders of government, and I say orders because it isn't about levels, it's about different responsibilities. When you have the federal government working with the provincial government and delivery of service in our municipalities, great things can happen. And we have seen it when Hetty Fry was in office. We've seen it the last time the Liberals were in office. So in an expression of collaboration, absolutely. The Liberal Party is here to make the healthcare system better and to see that it is adequately funded across the country.
Thank you, Randy. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Absolutely, we would welcome all opinions in the consultation.
Thank you, Blaine. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Thanks, Sue. If elected as the MP for Edmonton Centre, I wouldn't only consult with you, I wouldn't only consider your opinions, I would embrace them. I've been an advocate for a national pharmacare program for more than a decade now. I've actually already read your brief. I'm carrying it with me. I've read the brief from the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions. I actually have a stack of reports from academics and advocacy groups that explain why a national pharmacare system makes sense, both in terms of the provision of health care and the money that we spend on it. This is a program that is long overdue. It makes sense for individuals, it makes sense for the public purse, and if I'm elected as MP, I won't just sit down and listen to people who think that pharmacare is a good idea. I will join you in any advocacy work that needs to be done to make this dream a reality.
Thank you, Gil. I'll return to the microphone. Ma'am, you have a question, please.
My name's Bernice Cassidy. I'm the past chair of CARP Edmonton, and that's the Canadian Association of Retired Persons. We had an issue come up at our last meeting. There is a number of people that may be unable to vote because they do not have a street address. And this can be, for instance, the First Nations people that live on a reserve. They don't have a street address. There's many people. The people that are homeless, they don't have a street address. There's many people that don't have a street address. Small towns, they have a box number. They don't have a street address. Is there anyone here that can clarify that? And how are we going to get this identification so they can vote? I'll leave it up to you fellas. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. This time, Gil, you have the first opportunity for a response.
Well, thank you very much for the question. You've identified a real and very troublesome change that has been imposed upon our electoral system by the Harper government. The hurdles that have been erected, and I use that term very consciously because they are hurdles and they've been imposed deliberately. They were introduced as a political and election strategy by the Harper government through the passage of a bill with an Orwellian name, the Fair Elections Act, introduced in the last session of Parliament by the Harper government. And make no mistake, this piece of legislation has nothing to do with fair elections. It is an attempt to use the power of Parliament to further the interests of the party in government. And they want to do that by erecting barriers to voter participation. This is nothing more than the kind of mean-spirited and unethical and immoral kind of voter suppression tactics that we've seen from the Tea Party Republican candidates in the United States. This is not about that, so we should not be surprised that seniors, Aboriginal people, people without a street address are having trouble registering to vote. This is not an accident. It was done by design. So, obviously, because Parliament has dissolved, there's nothing we can do about this particular piece of legislation right now, but I'm committing to you that if there is a new Democrat government, that piece of legislation will be torn up and we will have an election act that actually brings fairness back to the system and actually encourages voter participation rather than suppresses it.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Good question. Real and genuine concern. We are opening up the lines of communication. We're all in favor of electronic voting through open source, secure ballot to make it easier for seniors, the disenfranchised, the homeless, all those people. Everybody has a voice as a Canadian. And I think that voice actually, my personal opinion, once you start contributing to the system, once you get your first job and you see those tax deductions come off your check, you should have a vote. You should be able to say what you want to do with the future of the country. When I got my first job at the age of 12, I believe the federal debt was $12,000 and some odd dollars. By the time I could have a say when I was 18, it had risen to 16 point something. It hasn't gone up that much since I've been able to vote, but it's got to come down. And with our program, with everybody's voice, we're helping everybody, even the poorest of Canadians, to have their voice heard. And eventually, with our plan, we're going to drop the federal deficit by $30 billion a year so we can start saving some money on interest, because we're paying 28 point something just on interest. That's not paying down the principal. We got to fix that.
Blaine, thank you. Randy, your turn.
Thanks, Ray. Bernice, I appreciate your question. The Fair Elections Act is a Republican tactic from the United States to suppress voters. And it's designed to suppress voters that statistically will not vote for the Conservative Party of Canada, including persons without a fixed address, homeless, people who are in between and moving and simply cannot get an address from one province or the other, the elderly who do not have a driver's license, and also, as you mentioned, Bernice, Aboriginals. Vouching is gone. This is how this used to be resolved before. People could vouch for someone's name and where they lived. That is now gone. It has been stripped out of the ability of Elections Canada to use in elections. The other thing that happened is that the Chief Electoral Officer's power to educate youth and people about voting was also severely reduced. So the Liberal Party, in its plan for fair, open, and transparent government, will get rid of the Fair Elections Act and restore Elections Canada's ability to educate and open up the ability to vote again. Now, the practical answer to your question, go and talk to the Chief Returning Officer in your riding. In this riding, it's at Westmount Mall, right by the food court. Talk to the CRO and the DRO and figure out what is possible. There is a long list, folks, note this down, elections.ca. Go to elections.ca and you can see what the Conservatives have left us in terms of IDs. And one of the things we're doing with the province is making sure that folks can get IDs from their shelter. A temporary ID for a shelter, or an ID for a shelter, or a simple acknowledgement that John Smith is sleeping at the shelter may well pass the test. We haven't tested it yet, but that is one of the things that I would encourage CARP to do. And you can do this right now. You can go and see your CROs and DROs wherever the Shaw broadcast is going to. Make sure that persons who are not able to vote are able to get to the returning office and understand what they need to be able to vote, and test it now, because we have 39 days to go.
Thank you, Randy. Ladies and gentlemen, again, another question. Ma'am.
My name is Paulette, and speaking in response to this woman's concerns about the conditions of seniors' homes, my worry is all the privatization of seniors' homes. We used to own them. The province used to own them, and they were well respected and they were well run, and people were doing well in those homes. I joined a picket line at one of these private nursing homes, and most of the people there working were immigrants, and they were lovely, lovely people. They really cared about their people they were taking care of, and they told me that if somebody was fired or they quit or something, they were not replaced. And the person I would be talking to would say, well, I used to take care of 20 patients, now I have 40. And I cannot take care of 40. It's beyond my ability. Meanwhile, that private corporation had like an 80 billion income surplus from running their homes here in Edmonton. Now, this is disgusting. I mean, that's the only word you can say about it. We need to do something about that. We need to put seniors' care back in the hands of the province, because if you're running a home to make money, you're going to cut corners. Now, I'm not saying they're all bad and they're all rotten, but I think we need to be in control of them. You shouldn't be making money off of seniors who don't have money, or their families. I know of families who are paying for their parents to be in these places, and while they're trying to put their kids through university, things like this. It's the wrong system. I'd like to see all of our seniors' cares back in government hands, where the people are paid properly and they don't have to go on strike.
Ma'am, are you asking the candidates to comment on the proposal to what is their position on returning seniors' care to the provinces? Okay. This time, Blaine, you have the opportunity for first response.
I'm fully in favor of the nurses union taking control of all the nursing homes. I think they're truly exceptional people. My mother's part of the union, and if you want the best care for this generation, the senior generation, and future generations, I say you handed back the power to the caregivers themselves. I don't think government can do anything to provide any incentive or innovate anything better than the people on the ground can do themselves.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, may we have your response?
Sure. 3 days ago, I was speaking at a seniors residence and experienced what you're talking about. A lady explained to me that she's having trouble getting her wheelchair replaced, and it's one of these motorized wheelchairs, and she's needed it for 11 years. And at one point, the wheelchair wasn't working properly, and so she was stuck on the floor, couldn't get down to, couldn't get around the facility anymore. Asked for help from one of the staff, and was told by the staff, "I can't help you. It's not in our job description. Unless I'm taking you to or from a meal, I can't help you." And so this resident stayed there until she fiddled and figgled and finagled with her chair till it could actually move her again. So those kinds of health outcomes and living in dignity do not pass the Canadian Health Act test. And so what we have to do as civil society and as leaders in government is work with our partners, in this case at the provincial government, to make sure that the health outcomes are actually being realized. And it does require more money, but it also requires coordination, and it requires folks like you to advocate that the provincial government is allocating its resources so that the kind of care you want to see for elderly and in long-term care facilities and in palliative care facilities is happening. And that is the kind of role that the federal Liberal government played in the past when we were last in office, and you will see us play that kind of coordination and collaboration and funding role again.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Thanks for the question, Paulette. I think there are two big problems when it comes to long-term care in Canada generally and in Alberta in particular. The first is that long-term care, even though by everyone's estimation it's an integral part of the healthcare system, the reality is that it falls outside the umbrella of Medicare and does not receive the same kind of regulation or protection as hospital care under the Canada Health Act. So that's the first problem. Long-term care is part of the continuum of healthcare, but it falls outside of the Health Care Act. The second problem, which we've discussed earlier in this forum, has to do with division of responsibility between the different orders of government. In this case, healthcare in general and long-term care in particular is a responsibility of the provinces. You put those two things together, with the long-term care facilities being outside of the umbrella of Medicare and whatever's left over being largely under the control of the provinces, what it's created are two things. First, a patchwork across the country where provinces approach long-term care much differently. And second, it has created an opportunity for certain governments of certain political stripes to turn long-term care facilities into profit opportunities for the private sector. And that's what we saw here in Alberta, starting with the Klein government and then with successive provincial Conservative governments. Because it wasn't protected by the Canada Health Act, they were able to impose an ideological agenda that said that we should make money off the backs of seniors who need long-term care. So we need to do two things. We need to expand the Medicare umbrella to cover Medicare. That's a federal responsibility. Sorry.
Gil, I'm sorry, we're out of time. Ma'am, your question, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. My question to the candidates: Have you read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission summary report and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And what specifically will you do in Ottawa and the riding of Edmonton Centre to adopt the 94 recommendations of the TRC?
Thank you. Randy, we're back at the top. This is your opportunity to respond.
It was a moving day when Justice Sinclair released the report, and all 94 recommendations speak to a historic responsibility that we have. I'm more familiar with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report than I am with the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Peoples. We are the only party that has categorically said that we will get started right away on October 20th in restoring our commitment to Aboriginal peoples, and that we will get to work on all 94 recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And you will note that a few weeks ago, we made a commitment to kindergarten to 12 education, which I think is recommendation 29, that we restore funding, and that we have committed $2.6 billion to K-12 education. There will be more commitments coming as it pertains to post-secondary education. And I think what's important to note here is that we had this come up at a Veterans Affairs roundtable that we had, where an individual who served as a veteran was also a survivor of the residential school system. And he talked about running away at 14. And he made his way down south and found a family that would take him in, and went into the military just so that he could find a place that he could call home. And that we have a great deal of work to do as Canadians to start the process of reconciliation. And that is why Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party have committed to an annual meeting of the leaders of Indigenous communities, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, across the country to address our mutual needs and how we move forward as a people. And quite frankly, one of the issues in which our international reputation has suffered because we have not stepped up to the plate is because we are not making good on our commitments and to the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous peoples, and we are going to make good on that promise.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Thanks very much. The question was, have I read the TRC report and the UN Declaration, and what would we do about it? The first part of my answer is that yes, I have, and for those who haven't, I would recommend that you do. This is an historic document, and to not put too fine a point on it, it comes to the conclusion, and this is a troubling conclusion for non-Aboriginal Canadians, but it comes to the conclusion that we are a country in the grips of systemic institutional racism directed against the Indigenous community. And this is a situation that simply cannot stand in a country like Canada. It is at odds with our vision of ourselves. We see ourselves as a caring, open, pluralistic country, and that is exactly what we should be. But our treatment of the Indigenous community is a stain on our country's history and our country's reputation. And this is a particularly important issue for Edmonton Centre because along with a few other cities in Western Canada, we have a particularly high concentration of urban Aboriginal people. And if elected, one of my first jobs is to build a dialogue with Indigenous population in our own community, and I commit to working hard to implement all of those recommendations as quickly and aggressively as possible. But the first thing that we're going to do is, and our leader has promised this, is an inquiry, a long overdue inquiry into the issue of missing and murdered Aboriginal women.
Thank you, Gil. May I have the next question, please, sir? Oh, I'm sorry.
I know we're a small party, but I'm still here.
No, that's my fault, Blaine.
No worries.
I ticked off your name with a... Please, your turn.
Actually, the answer to your question is I personally have not, but I have done individual consultations in person and online with friends and complete strangers, and it's a dark spot on Canada's history. It's an example of what happens with government mismanagement. When you hand over your power to the government to determine what's best for you and not yourself, you get results like what we've seen. Our party's platform in regards to Aboriginal affairs, we recognize the right of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people to meaningful autonomy and jurisdiction over their territories. The jurisdiction includes natural resources, mining rights, local economic affairs, and community membership. And as such, we would replace the Indian Act with a blanket guarantee of sovereignty for all Indigenous groups, end all federal restrictions and obligations on Indigenous territories, streamline the land claim process, and find and eliminate systemic discrimination against Indigenous peoples. And those treaties that are written in blood sometimes, a long time ago, we're going to enforce those. It's a contract, and libertarians are all about contract law. So you signed a contract, and we're going to make sure it's honored. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. That brings us to our next question, sir.
Well, first of all, my name is Hai Nguyen. I'm a member of the National Association of Federal Referees. First, the clarification regarding question number 4 from the Master of Ceremony there on the percentage of 25 and 50-50. I would like 3 candidates clarify their position very clearly in terms of the number. And my question are the following. Number 1, what are your position on the voluntary sector? What would you do? 2, would you prefer to increase access for the senior and vulnerable member of the society by opening the office of the federal government, such as the veteran and citizenship immigration? And number 3, regarding the issue of Syrian refugee, would you provide them with the necessary health care? Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, there are 3 questions there. I assume you're ready. All right. Blaine, would you like to go first this time?
I had a very difficult time. What were the 3 questions again? Sorry.
Okay. Sir, would you like to repeat the 3 questions again? Perhaps we should do them one at a time. What is your first question?
Well, first of all, the clarification on your question number 4 on the percentage, 25 and 50 or 50. I want 3 candidates made very clear. What are their position on that for clarification? And my 3 questions.
Sorry, let's just take them one at a time.
Let's deal with that.
Gentlemen, the first question is the public service healthcare plan cost sharing ratio, which has gone from 25-75 to 50-50, and the gentleman would like to know what your positions are on that.
The deal you signed up for was 25-75, correct? That's the deal you get. There's a contract. You can't change the rules at the end of the game.
Thank you. Randy.
Thanks, Ray. We don't agree that these changes were imposed unilaterally in an act of legislation. So we'll look back to the 25-75 formula and meet with the public sector union to figure out how to improve benefits moving forward for not only retirees, but also making sure that we treat the next generation of federal public servants fairly.
Thank you. Gil, your answer, please.
Yeah, I think the 25-75 ratio is entirely appropriate. Even though the government attempted to demonize it, it was something that was negotiated. It's fair, and it was part of your entire compensation package. Federal public sector workers are simply not overpaid. They're generous. Their benefits are reasonable, and they should be maintained. And because these changes were made with using the heavy hand of legislation rather than changing through the collective bargaining process, I would advocate to the caucus, should we form government, that all changes to benefits and wages that were made through the use of legislation should be returned to their original state. And then if the government needs to negotiate, we would do so through the normal collective bargaining process.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sir, your second question,
my
please.
3 questions, and then First of all, your position on the voluntary sector. What would you do about it?
Voluntary sector?
Yes.
I can take it.
All right,
Who's first?
Gil,
Yeah.
please.
I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're talking about is the trend that we've seen from various conservative governments around the world to make an effort to deliver services that previously have been delivered through the public sector, to try to find ways to deliver those services or services similar to them through the voluntary sector. Probably the most high-profile example of a government that has taken this approach is the Conservative Cameron government in the UK. They gave it a name. They called it the Big Society. But I want to make it really clear, whether you call it the Big Society or the Third Way, whatever label you put on this, this is about cutting public services. This is about reducing spending on the backs of working people. Because what happens with this approach, wherever it's taken, is that governments essentially try to deliver the same kind of services through workers who are paid much less and live much more precariously. So if they hand it over to the volunteer sector, you know, maybe it'll be volunteers doing it, maybe it'll be a non-profit organization. If these people are paid at all, and in many cases, as in Britain, they were not paid at all, they count on volunteers. If they are paid, they're paid much less. This is not good for our economy, it's not good for our society. But even if you don't care about the individual workers, you should care about the quality of service. Because when a service is delivered through the public sector by trained and certified professionals, people with experience, people who are confident in their jobs, you get a better quality of service. So this is a road towards substandard quality of service for citizens and taxpayers.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your response, please?
Voluntarism is actually a subsector of libertarianism. We believe government doesn't add anything to the system. It merely skims off the top. They take your taxes, they take a cut out of it, and then they disseminate it where they see fit, which may or may not be in line with what you see fit. Your tax dollars might be going to something which you abhor, which you would never vote for, but you have no choice. So we're going to keep the money in your pocket to spend as you best see fit, whether you want to volunteer your time, do whatever you want to buy someone steel-toe work boots and a transit pass to get them on their feet because they want to get back to work. You should be able to do that. You don't need government to tell you to do that. You want to do that yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Randy, may we have your response, please?
Happily. Part of the reason that I'm running to serve as the next member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre is to be an advocate for the voluntary sector. I honestly cannot remember a time when I wasn't a volunteer for something in my community, whether that was being an altar boy or singing in a choir or raising money for the Fédération du Sport Francophone du Canada or the Economic Council or serving as chair of the Centre for Family Literacy. And to that point, we actually took the learnings that we gained here at the Centre for Family Literacy, and a group of us got together 6 years ago and created Literacy Without Borders. Now I can tell you from having been the volunteer executive director of that organization since then, what the Conservative government has done is systematically choke off the ability of very legitimate and well-intentioned and expert voluntary groups to do the very basic and necessary fundraising that is required to sustain their civil society organizations by choking off access to charitable license applications and approvals at the CRA. And I've raised this inside our caucus, and that it will be one of the things that we will not just relax, but we will reform, because you cannot have a system that is designed so that there is no abuse whatsoever. You catch the abusers, they pay their penalties and their fines, and you design a system that will work for all Canadians, and that is what we want to see for the voluntary sector, because it is a multi-billion-dollar industry that helps Canadians from coast to coast to coast in all walks of life, and it's a critical component of our society.
Thank you, Randy. Sir, your third question.
Regarding the Office of the Veteran and also citizenship in immigration.
All right. Sir, could you clarify the question? There's some
Yeah,
uncertainty.
the question is, in the past year, the office, Veteran Office and Citizenship Immigration closed, and all you have to do is to pick up the phone and then talk to a call center. So now people want to have a face-to-face meeting, so in order, to get their problem solved. So now, do you make a commitment that you will reopen Veteran Office and Citizenship and Immigration?
All right. Gentlemen, Randy, would you like to go first?
As it pertains to the Veterans Affairs, we have launched a robust policy that you can find at realchange.ca. We will reopen all 9 Veterans Affairs offices that the Conservative government closed. We will ensure that 2 of those centers are centers of excellence for mental health and PTSD sufferers. We will also restore the benefits as they were before the Harper government came into office, and we will hire 400 new federal public federal public servants to serve Veterans Affairs members, and to make sure that veterans have one person in the Government of Canada that is responsible for their care, and that they will help the veterans navigate the system and not require the veterans to know which of 65 different forms they have to fill out to get the simple benefits that they're entitled to. This government has systematically said that it will lead in the world on defense, and that it leads with defense, and it believes in the idea of the military, but not in the military itself, and then cuts off the veterans when they come home, to the point of our advocating against Veterans Affairs funding at federal court. What kind of a government advocates against its own servicemen and women in federal court to deny them the benefits that they were promised to them before they head into the field? Not my government and not in my Canada, and we will make those changes.
Thank you, Randy. Blaine, your response, please.
All right. Veterans Affairs would be rolled into the defense budget. As libertarians, we believe federal government only has 4 responsibilities: judicial system, policing, sovereignty, Arctic sovereignty, and national defense, and paying down the debt they've racked up on the back of future Canadians. So we would roll Veterans Affairs into the Defense Department, and absolutely, you've served this country almost more than anybody else. We may or may not be here if it wasn't for our veterans. So our commitment to them doesn't end when the war's over. And the best way to stop and to aid more veterans being created is we have a policy of non-foreign intervention. If they come to our doorstep and they want to play with us, we can defend ourselves. But we're not going to go and play in someone else's sandbox and create enemies for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. Gil, may we have your response, please?
Sure. The Harper government has made political hay by sending our troops abroad on multiple missions over the past 10 years. While overseas, the Harper government has not provided them with the kind of support, either in terms of people or material, that they need to get those jobs done. They've become a PR backdrop for conservative politics. But even though our troops have been used as political pawns, essentially, to further the political interests of the Conservative Party, once they come back to Canada, they have been treated with disrespect and even contempt. So and this just simply has to stop. And so in terms of what the New Democrats would do, and I'll put this into, like Randy mentioned, 400 jobs. That's not all the jobs that have been cut. The Harper government has cut 900 jobs in the Veterans Affairs Department. We would replace those jobs, and we would reopen all 9 Veterans Affairs offices that were closed. We would also reopen immigration offices. Because, I mean, we have a growing population of immigrants, temporary foreign workers, some of whom are facing very difficult situations in their workplaces. We simply cannot ask Canadians, whether they're veterans or immigrants or other citizens looking for frontline services, to accept the situation that we have right now where important services are being delivered through a 1-800 number. We won't stand for that.
Thank you, Gil. No, I'm sorry, sir. We've actually run out of time. And what I need to do at this stage is give each of our three candidates an opportunity to sum up with their closing remarks. And then I'll have a few comments. And I've been asked, gentlemen, if you could limit your closing remarks to 2 minutes, please. Thank you. So, Gil, would you like to go first this time?
I'm sorry.
Would you like to go first?
Well, I did. I opened.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you open last time?
I gave the first opening statements.
All right, then.
Or do you want, that's
No, if you opened, and I'm sorry, we've gone through so many questions, I've just been rotating, but Randy, if you're happy to start, please do.
Folks, thank you for an enlightening and informative and fun afternoon with you here. It's amazing how quickly 2 hours can pass when you're engaging in issues that matter to our city, to our province, to our country. Canada is a land of opportunity. It's a land of hope. It's a land of prosperity and of pride. And should I be fortunate enough to be chosen by the citizens of Edmonton Centre to be the next member of Parliament for this part of our great city, then I will work hard every day to make sure that I take those values with me to Ottawa. They are some of the values that led me to get involved with the team at Startup Edmonton, who take small fledgling businesses, incubate them, and then have them grow, create jobs, and make our city more dynamic and more prosperous. And that organization, Startup Edmonton, is now one of the best organizations in the world, and certainly one of the best in the country. We have amazing stories to tell here in Edmonton. Some folks here I know are involved in this work. Here in Edmonton, we lead the country in terms of the plan to end homelessness. With Homeward Trust, with organizations like E4C, with the Housing First program, we are leading the way in helping folks to find housing, to restore dignity, and then find the supports that they need. There are other parts of the country, folks, that need our help, and they need us to stand up. I want us to get back to the point where we are a country that includes all Canadians, that includes all citizens. And I can tell you that together we can build those safe, inclusive, caring communities. And if you want a member of Parliament who will stand up for Edmonton, if you want someone who will stand up for real change, then I ask for your support. And I promise that if on October 19th you choose me as your next member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre, I will work as hard as I can and as best as I can every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Gil, may we have your closing remarks?
First, I'd like to thank the National Association of Federal Retirees for this opportunity. I've enjoyed our 2 hours together. And, you know, I opened this forum by saying that seniors at a national level have a tremendous opportunity during this election to make real change. And I want to close by saying that seniors living in the constituency of Edmonton Centre also have an opportunity that in some ways is unique. You have an opportunity to choose a candidate who has a proven track record on the issues that matter to you. And I'm that candidate. I've spent my entire adult and professional life embracing and advocating for many of the issues that have been adopted by your organization. Whether it is the fight to preserve dignity and advocacy in retirement income, I've been there on the front lines, fighting for an expanded CPP, an expanded GIS. My goal as president of the Alberta Federation of Labour has been to preserve retirement income not only for union members, but also to expand the range and security of income available to non-union workers as well. I've been on the front lines fighting for our Medicare system, fighting for pharmacare, and so with me as your MP, and with Tom Mulcair as our first NDP Prime Minister, With us on your side, you'll have forceful, effective, and reliable allies in Ottawa, allies who share your values and embrace your policy goals. I look forward to the privilege of this opportunity.
Thank you, Gil. Blaine, may we have your closing remarks, please?
Austerity, cutbacks, reductions. This is all stuff you guys have worked for, and now they're going to take it away from you. There's talk of bailouts. Well, how about a bail-in for the people? How about we give the money, keep the money in your pocket to spend as you see fit, whether it's on your friends, families, your loved ones. How does a student in Ottawa know it's better for you and your loved ones than you yourself? They don't. If we were elected, we'd institute a maximum federal tax rate of 15%, keeping more money in your pocket. We'd have $4,000 exemptions for each student, each person with a disability, every senior. On top of that, foreign policy, we're going to stop making veterans. We're going to stop interfering in foreign wars. It's not our business. We are going to repeal sections of the Criminal Code, Section 91 to 92, making it legal for you to have a firearm. A firearm is a tool in the hands of a responsible citizen. We've got to stop making criminals out of otherwise law-abiding citizens just because they choose to have a firearm to defend themselves and their loved ones and their property. Aboriginal affairs, as was previously mentioned, we have a deal, we have a contract, we have treaties. We're going to honor those. We're giving you guys the power back in your possession to do as you see fit. And on immigration, the man's final question regarding Syria, not specifically to Syria, everybody should enjoy the same rights if they're coming to Canada. We seek to significantly decrease the bureaucratic burden for refugees and asylum seekers of any creed, color, and nationality. Eliminate the point system for immigration and replace it with a background check for violent and fraudulent criminal activity. We're going to eliminate the temporary foreign worker program and replace it with a streamlined work visa program and a residency rollout. Welcome to Canada. Here's your work boots. Thanks for being Canadian. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, during the past 2 hours, Gil, Blaine, and Randy have answered your questions and the questions that the association posed. And I believe they answered the questions with clarity and gave you some choices. So I'd like you to join me in thanking Gil, Blaine, and Randy for their time this afternoon and answering your questions in a very forthright manner.
The proceeding was an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.